I'll give you a hint later on as to a technique that might be helpful as well. We, through the magic of technology, are now live with
the winter is here.
Winter is here. Hold on one second. I gotta mute my volume there. All right. So it is the last Friday of the month, and we saved the best for last. And with us is Mr. Russ Winter, all the way from Prague, the Czech Republic. And I was just, when I hit that button for to go live, I'm thinking this thing has become so commonplace that I really take it for granted. I mean, if we roll back the tape 20 years, right, to be able to do this would be unheard of. You had to work for CNN or one of the major news corporations to get a satellite uplink and then broadcast to people.
Yeah, the Zoom technology is pretty amazing too.
Zoom is good. It's and the interface with YouTube and the connectivity with the wire. Yeah. And here we are. You're in Prague, I'm in Texas, and we just punch these buttons. And sometimes it just becomes so, as the French would say, de rigueur, right? Commonplace.
It doesn't seem like there's too much time delay. I remember on Skype, there used to be kind of delays and breakups.
So there's a bit of a lag in this stream and the live stream to YouTube, but it's not too bad. You step back. This is kind of mind-blowing what we're doing, right? And we're sharing ideas, we're sharing alternative perspectives, and we're two people amongst literally hundreds of thousands, if not millions, who are doing the same thing, either on the broadcast side or on the reception side where people are taking it in. It's a phenomenon that's unlike any other time in history. So I just get used to it. Like, this is just what we do. And when I did that, I'm like, wow, we're actually connecting these two places on the planet that are pretty far away in real time. We got great video, great sound, and now my cats arrived to top it all off. So welcome.
And then you even have New Year's in Prague in the background.
That's right. New Year's. I'm getting you fired up there, Russ. Do you have any plans?
I like to go see the fireworks. I'll go down to the river, the Vltava.
Do they do it right in Prague? Do they?
Not bad. It's it's kind of good to get out with the plebes and the people and do that.
Right. And how was your Christmas? You and I were talking before the show.
Just nothing. I talk to my son a lot. I got him on. We talk on Skype and had some good calls with him.
Right.
That's kind of my life now. I'm kind of, my family's my son, and my parents are dead, and I'm basically an old man. That's it. I have friends here, but they go visit their families.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's hopefully, kind of the aperture that people have as they get older. They have descendants, and they're part of a, biological or partially biological tribal unit. But unfortunately, COVID did a real whack job to a lot of that.
And then a lot of people aren't having kids, and probably a lot of people that are listening to me. I'll tell you what, when you get to be my age, you're going to be thankful you have a kid, or I shouldn't say a kid, a child or a son in my case, that you get along with reasonably well.
Yeah.
And you have ties with, so you're not estranged. You can have kids and be estranged. That happens too. But if you don't have that, you're going to be going into your old age pretty lonely.
Yeah. I mean, that's when this whole idea of extended family and an intentional community, I think, could have a real role in people's lives. Unfortunately, here in the West, we're not really good at that. We're not really good at the communal experience. And there's pluses and minuses to that.
Well, real quick. My dad, both my mom and my dad were really into blood. Blood runs thick.
Yeah.
And so if you're related, or you could be a cousin or second cousin, it didn't matter. They really treated everybody that they consider family well. It's kind of an old school.
I was gonna say that's old school. Yeah. Yeah. My family, water was thicker than blood because it's very, how do I say this? It's very soluble, my family ties. Real quick, I've never asked you this question because you come from an athletic family. And you yourself were a bit of an athlete. Is your son an athlete? Did he participate in sports?
He was a really good baseball player. He could really throw. He could have really been a great catcher, I think. I used him as a pitcher, at high school level.
Right.
But then he kind of, what tends to happen with a lot of athletes, they reach 18, maybe play high school ball. That's what I did. I was a good high school basketball player, and then that's it.
Yeah.
Unless you want to go to some junior college or small college, or nobody's going to be given. Not too many people are getting college scholarships or going into the minor leagues. And you go into minor leagues, very few of those guys make it. So that's the problem with sports.
There's a real level of separation from being good at a high school level and then the next level.
Yeah, and usually it's physical. And so I can tell you that I actually went out. I can just tell you a little story. I went out to the University of Washington. My dad invited me on the team because I could really shoot. And I think he was just kind of curious how I would do. No scholarships or anything like that.
You're a walk-on.
Yeah, that would have been a scandal, to give me a scholarship. And so I went on there, and I was playing with he had some good players. Some of these guys went on to pros. Louis Nelson was one of them, who's kind of a friend of mine. He was from Compton. And I remember going out there, and he was bringing the ball down the court. We were just doing some scrimmaging. And he did this little head fake and physical move by me so fast. I mean, I might as well have just dropped my sneakers right there. There's no way I could defend against that. And then I got run over by another player because they're just more physical than I was used to. And then I said, Dad, I'm done. Sorry.
I'm topped out. I'm the king of the YMCA, but here
just not strong enough, not big enough, not at that level.
Yeah, you were the king of the Y, but there you were cannon fodder.
Right.
Those are rude awakenings for people when they think they're really good at something, and then they encounter even we're kind of off track a little bit, but I promise we'll get on track because I know how much people love sports. But there's this guy that played for the Boston Celtics named Brian Scalabrine. Did you ever run across him at all when you were so his nickname, I think, was like the janitor or something like that. And he went to USC. He looked like one of these guys that would not play in the NBA. And he set up these videos where these college players would take him on, or anybody, guys that would play internationally, like in Israel or Greece or someplace like that. And he always cleaned their clock, right? And this is kind of a lower level NBA player who had a roster spot on the Celtics, but it just went to show the difference between even a guy that was maybe the 10th or 11th guy on the team and somebody who played some college ball or played overseas. It was like night and day.
Right.
That's how big the difference was. Yeah.
Right.
So, all right. So from the physical into the oddly metaphysical, let's take our trip into the past. We got Mars retrograde, we got Mercury retrograde, and we're looking at the neocons. Some people call them the Ziocons, and their interesting journey from obscurity to, in a lot of ways, running global policy and global programs. And clearly, at the kind of the when I say butt, I'm talking about the rifle butt, at the butt end of foreign wars, places like Iraq and Afghanistan and Libya and now Ukraine. They all have neocon fingerprints all over them. That's the later generation neocons that we're going to cover later in the show. But what Russ is going to do is he's going to take us back to the roots with the father of neoconservatism, and that's Leo Strauss. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to tee up Russ's website, so we have a visual, and we're going to let Russ kind of pull back the covers here on really what is probably one of the most powerful groups of the 20th and now the 21st century. So here we go, Russ. Francis Leo Strauss, the neocons, and the Synarchist conspiracy. You did this back in the summer, June 6, 2022. Let's dive in. Let's start with Leo Strauss.
Well, he's considered the intellectual godfather of the modern neocon movement, and German Jewish descent. Once again, immigrated to the U.S. in 1937, and immediately picked up by the Rockefeller-funded University of Chicago. I think he came out of the Frankfurt School.
He was part of the Frankfurt Group.
Yeah.
Yep.
And he was brought to the university by its chancellor, Robert Maynard Hutchins, which we should probably do a show on him too, because he was just he's just kind of one of the original sponsors of a lot of these, I think, really sketchy individuals.
And these people are all saboteurs, right? Interesting that we have Sabbatean and saboteur as well. I never made that connection, but guys like Maynard Hutchins, they're saboteurs. They're letting these people into our country.
Yeah, opening the gates.
That's right. They're gatekeepers.
Trojan horses.
Yeah.
And so you kind of, wonder why the country is so messed up now, because it's just saturated for decade after decade. And we're going to get into this, we developed this conversation. We're going to get into the work of Professor Susan Strange, who I think adds some color to what's happened. But reverting back to Strauss, so he was, again, very active, aggressive role with the foundations. And so I wrote another article called The Reese Committee's Report from 1954 shows foundations funded the collectivist capture of the U.S. education. So that was a major congressional investigation back in the day when they actually looked into some of this stuff.
Right.
So you get this twisted, inverted talent and legacy set up in the United States, this turtle on the fence post, Rockefeller Foundation, and then all the pseudo intellectuals just cheerlead this guy constantly. And so you have William Crystal, and I'm sure everybody knows who William Crystal is because he gets a lot of press play on the legacy media, the Lugan Press. And he just glows over Leo Strauss's discoveries in history of political philosophy had the effect of liberating his students from the yoke of contemporary thought. So he studied under Strauss. And
so I have this fantasy of getting a free pass and punching 5 people in the face without any kind of repercussions. He is a candidate for the 5, right? I mean, just look at the smirk and the grin, and you can tell this guy's he's never been struck in his life. He's never been in a fight in his life, right? Like he would not know what to do, but he's so obnoxious that it summons like feelings of just,
I know,
retribution on some level. And because they've been getting away with this for decades and decades and decades, they've aligned themselves with the military industrial complex. The military industrial complex is their sugar daddy and they profit for more. Anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's keep going.
Well, no, that nails it right there, because that's the money power. So they're working for the money power, the war business, the financial network. They're water boys for them. I call them flying monkeys.
By the way, he was responsible for Sarah Palin on the McCain ticket.
Oh my God. Yeah. See, there's all kinds of little side alley stories with these guys. But anyway, so Strauss incorporated Machiavellian thinking. So it was Machiavellian. He's a dark triad: psychopath, Machiavellian, and narcissist. That's what a dark triad is. And so he slipped in his unscrupulous Frankist doctrine by saying virtue would not be applicable because no regime could meet its standard. So he just clears the deck. You can't be virtuous.
Right.
So a new regime should be created by harnessing man's tendency for self-interest or quote unquote human nature. Strauss, knowingly or through osmosis, was a de facto leading proponent of the twisted, inverted Sabbatean Frankist agenda, coming from the same area of Germany, Frankfurt, where I think the Sabbatean Frankists really got a boost through the Rothschilds.
Right.
We've explored that. Strauss, like all these people, we're going to see a pattern, believe that rule should be by chosenites or adepts who are most adept at deceiving the public. He just stated that clearly.
Yeah, that's a principle. That's a principle, right? His principle is, in order to rule and rule effectively, you have to be deceptive, right? It's one of the cornerstone beliefs of Straussian theory.
Yeah, he said that truth needs to be hidden or suppressed, or the masses will quickly succumb to anarchy. They can't handle the truth, Strauss said. Really? Who says?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if there's even one iota of truth to that. I think you get a pretty screwed up world by going with Strauss's philosophy.
Well, here's what I think. I think that the world that Leo Strauss lived in may not have been able to handle the truth. God, country, apple pie, but we have been so deconditioned to follow orders or succumb to this sort of general narrative that I don't think that statement holds any water anymore. People are hungry for the truth.
Yeah, I mean, it's evil. I just think it's just pure evil. See, he's a proponent of liberal constitutionalism. And of course, they really play this idea of democracy, liberal constitutionalism. And so the idea is to create a small group of intertwined kleptocratic billionaires controlling the whole faux democratic process. That's the way the West works. Yep. They kind of appeal to democratic process, and the whole thing is being run by kleptocratic billionaires. And that way, if a great loot is lined up, such as the COVID stimulus resolving inflation, or now they're going to loot, Ukraine. It's interesting that Zelensky goes and meets with Larry Fink of BlackRock about doing business in post-war Ukraine.
Well, let's talk about that just for a second. So, what does that really mean? Right, that Larry Fink and BlackRock are now going to manage the money fund for Ukraine. Does that mean that
the ultimate in corruption?
But they're banking on Ukraine not being a pile of rubble in a year, right? I mean, that's what they're banking on, literally and figuratively. So do they know something? Do they know that whatever's happening in Ukraine is not only going to be sustainable at some point, but they'll be able to bring all these American corps in, or these globalist corps in, like Rand and Fluor and DynCorp and all these different corporations, to basically rebuild Ukraine? Is this what we're looking at here?
Well, I think you're looking at a variation of rebuilding Germany, for instance, or Europe after World War II, or Japan, very similar to that. And who ends up in power and controlling everything? And who captures all the wealth? I mean, Larry, are you going to take a stake in the Ukraine to do all this? Are you just doing this out of the goodness of your heart?
So the rumor is that Ukraine is part of a plan for Greater Israel, or that Israel would extend north, right, through the neighboring countries. I think they'd have to go through Iraq and Iran, if I'm not mistaken. And then above Iran is Georgia, which they have always had some kind of historic claim to. And then above Georgia is Ukraine. So you can make a straight run up from Israel through those territories. And that I've heard that the plan for Ukraine is to essentially make it the new Israel. Have you heard that?
Yeah, they call it Khazaria 2.0. I mean, there's probably elements of truth to it, because there's Jewish roots in the Ukraine.
Absolutely.
And they probably need another state to lord over other than just Israel. Israel's got to be kind of problematic for them, so it might be a escape plan. I wouldn't rule that out. Just wreck the country, go in and turn it into a slave state. Put everybody in poverty and debt, and a lot of good agriculture. There's some manufacturing potential. I think the Ukrainian people sort of have some potential, but I don't know if it's ever going to be realized.
So we've got this whole thing going on in Ukraine with the Zelensky thing. Just frosted me watching him up there. And it was like he was the president. It was like he was the de facto president of the United States in that moment. And of course, BlackRock, which has its fingerprints everywhere. And this all goes back to the original mission of the neocons. What we're seeing here is what I wouldn't call it the culmination, but it is a very advanced evolution, which we'll get into later with people like Norman Podhoretz and Kagan and all those characters. Why don't you keep on rolling here?
Okay, so a real principle of Strauss is that the mankind is intrinsically wicked. He was a disciple of Jeremy Bentham and Thomas Hobbes. I've got articles on them if you want to dig a little deeper. But they have to be governed. Us Chosenites need to govern you. And so it's okay to combine deceit with manufactured boogeymen. So the boogeyman concept is really big. That's what 9/11 was all about. And so such governance can only be established when men are united, and they can only be united against other people. That's a direct quote from Strauss.
You're either with us or against us.
Yep. Some made up boogeyman. Right now, it's clearly Russia, China. I mean, there are enemies, there are rivals in the world. That's realistic. You can't just ignore that. But you can't just turn everybody into a boogeyman and just go crazy and endanger the whole world, because somebody's liable to push a button.
Yep.
So Strauss, following Machiavelli, maintained that if there's no external threat exists, that one has to be manufactured. He said that. So the guy's a liar.
Right.
I'm going to be quoting these guys directly throughout the show. This is not Russ Winter just making this stuff up.
So Shadia Drury, pretty interesting critic of Strauss, and often quoted on the Straussian methodology.
Okay, yes, the Leo Strauss and the American Right is the name of the book. Mm-hmm. And so Straussian types are less restrained by convention, more capable of resorting to terror, other criminal methods, if such measures are effective in accomplishing the desired end. In Strauss's case, his view that Machiavellian ends justifies the means was married with his conversion to political Zionism. This plague has also been merged with a crackpot Americanism mythos that the United States and its bogus kleptocratic democracy is the only source for good in the entire world and should be supported, or else evil will prevail. Well, that's the font right there. What I just said is the font where all the people we're going to talk about today operate from. And they write books like Samuel Huntington's Clash of the Civilization, trot out Thomas Friedman, both Zionists, to propagate these schemes. They have to create a boogeyman out of the Muslim world and kind of diminish them.
Right.
Not a day passes on this planet without humanity battling against this egotistic Luciferian philosophy. Describes the dominant mentality, the crime syndicate that I write about on my pages. So the manufacturer scam puts forth the dialectic. So that's another big key to how they operate. You got the Hegelian dialectic. So everybody's always looking at two sides of the dialectic. And this scheme is referred to as the synarchist conspiracy, the use of dialectic. That makes sense to you?
Uh-huh.
And they're deliberately fostered and manipulated. And synarchy came to mean ruled by secret societies and has an overlay of occultism. Richard Coussel, a specialist in 20th century French political history, called it government by initiated elites or adepts. Important concept. And George Carlin called it the club, and you ain't in it. Another way of putting it.
Right, exactly.
And the process of control is described by Postal Demas, who wrote the Synarchist Pact, was based on the four orders that correspond to the Hindu caste system. The system contends that a division of people into order is natural and conforms with tradition. It sets out a program for invisible revolution or revolution from above, meaning taking over the state from within by infiltrating high offices. And I'll tell you the guy that really probably influenced Strauss is Leon Trotsky.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's funny.
He's a Trotskyite. Yeah.
I was reading about Trotsky before the show, and I was reading about him in his exile to Mexico. Very interesting. That's we could get into that maybe a little bit later. But yeah, I mean, the neocons, I wouldn't call them reformed Trotskyites, but they're an extension of Trotskyites. And
what Trotsky really represented, and I kind of go into that in the next article. We can kind of flip over to this neoliberal article called "Neoliberal Political Economy of the Organized Crime Syndicate."
Is that the one with the Susan Strange?
You're right. And this should lap over, and I think people should be able to connect the dots here. And so she was a neglected economic superstar who died in 1998 at the London School of Economics, one of the founders of the field of international political economy. In a series of groundbreaking books, Casino Capitalism and States and Markets and the Retreat of the State and Mad Money, Strange showed how epidemic levels of financial crime were a consequence of specific political decision based on an ideology. So I write, in our discussion of false dialectics that addresses the right Hegelian dialectic, because very few Winter Watch readers are going to buy into the left dialectic, but they might fall into the right dialectic. Some are ensnared by the right dialectic, and so then I write Hegelian dialectic as a strategy for modern globalism, and then you go into Anthony Sutton, which we've talked about. I'm regressing a little bit. Here's what she says. It's 4 ways that she showed that politics and financial crime epidemic were connected. Money is global. Regulation is national. So no wonder they want globalism, because you can't regulate globalism. Right. It's outside the rule of the law of a country.
Right. Exactly. There's and the way that globalism works, there's generally not one person associated with the decision-making process. It's by group or committee or by forum or by proxy. So there's never anybody taking full credit for whatever takes place, nor do they take full blame. And what happens is there's a series of decisions that are almost like release valves. We see this now with the World Economic Forum and the Council on Foreign Relations and all these NGOs and global groups. You can't finger one person inside that group and say you're responsible, right? And that is the crown jewel of globalism. It's ruled by group proxy, not by one individual, not by one state, not by one country. And it becomes you get into some very murky territory. It's very Kafkaesque, trying to figure out who's responsible for things in that environment.
Yeah, good point. Second, she says tax havens are an open invitation to embezzlement. And so unless you have somewhere to stash the cash, the looting of public money and state enterprises can only go so far. Tax havens give open invitations, Strange said. And she was early. It's gotten much worse than when she passed away in 1998. She's just basically, she's a fortune teller, because they've got so much of their money stashed away in tax havens and foreign banks and, tucked away everywhere. And it's created this billionaire class that I think are just intrinsically evil. There's just something about being ultra wealthy, how they got there. I just don't think it's possible. Maybe Elon Musk is a brush of fresh air. I mean, I'm very pleased with what he's doing. I know a lot of people think he's controlled opposition. I understand that, but we'll see about that one. But it's very rare for somebody that has that kind of wealth to do the right thing. They just don't.
I think time will reveal Elon Musk for who he is or who he isn't. And I'm in observer mode with Musk, because when I look at his historical record with businesses, he's one of your turtle on the fence post guys. Right.
Yeah, right. But you know, the thing about him, I sent you a little chart showing his wealth. I don't know if did you see that?
No, I didn't catch that. Yeah.
Well, anyway, it's what's happened to his wealth since he kind of started reform Twitter.
Yeah.
He's lost a lot of money. His worth has really dropped. What's that all about? They've really pulled the plug on Tesla.
Right. So it all depends on what he's doing with the offshore stuff. He's managed to keep Doge afloat because he has, astronomical amounts of Doge. I don't know what his Bitcoin status is. I think it's hard to say, what's going on with the above the line wealth and the below the line wealth with some of these guys.
Right.
Because
you just don't know what they really own.
You don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, I've heard rumors for years about Warren Buffett, and the real source of Warren Buffett's wealth has nothing to do with Dairy Queen or his investment fund. Like, the real source of his wealth is much more illicit than people understand and know. Right. So that's the below the line version of Warren Buffett. And so a lot of these guys have that. With Musk, we'll see. We'll see what happens.
Well, a lot of these guys work the government enterprise angle. So did Warren Buffett, because he happened to come around and get a good deal on. What was the insurance company that he basically stole?
Wasn't Omaha or Prudential or something like that?
Yeah, one of them that during the financial crisis he was able to steal it for a song.
Right. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Which is part of the formula of all this stuff. That's kind of what they're going to do with Ukraine, probably with Europe too, because you have some of these notorious parasite vultures that are eyeballing Europe.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what would happen if you were able to level half the population? What kind of resources would be underneath places that have existed for theoretically hundreds or not thousands of years? Right. The same goes to the United States. What would happen if they leveled 75% of the United States? What's underneath the land where, suburban subdivision housing tracts are? I mean, those are all
and get rid of a bunch of useless eaters.
That's right. And that's what's happening in Ukraine. Ukraine, and when you look at the biodiversity of Ukraine, it's crazy. All the different things that they have there. Right. And they're just waiting to be able to go in. And even those areas that are, east of the river, which have been Russian occupied for the most part, they want to get in there too. And they want to be able to, exploit those resources as well. So, yeah. And even
there's gas, there's coal.
There's tons of stuff in Ukraine. It's really biodiverse.
At one time, Ukraine was one of the leading manufacturing centers of the old Soviet Union.
That's right.
And they've lost all that. So number 3 for strange, extravagant banker bonuses contaminate politics. Obscene large bonuses paid to those in financial markets leads to a kind of moral contamination, has reinforced, accelerated the growth of the links between finance and politics. And again, bad people, it moves kleptocrats to the top.
This has FTX and Sam Bankman-Fried written all over it.
Yeah, well, this is written well before that.
I know, but you know what I mean? I mean, he conforms to everything that she's saying, especially the last two, the tax havens, Barbados, and then this, making all these donations to the Democrats and the Republicans to keep hands off. I mean, she was way ahead of her time here.
Yeah, she was amazing. And so she says bribery and corruption in politics are not new at all. It's the scale and extent of it that has risen. That's since 1998, along with the domination of finance over the real economy. Then I put a winter watch takeaway, perhaps not even strange, fully realize how deeply organized and systematic the systema compromat went. So there's a lot of compromat going on, I think. That brings us to Jeffrey Epstein et al. And here's the biggie. Money is political power. Globalization has redefined politics. Political power is not just what happens in governments, but money and markets have power. Illegitimate private operators grow richer. They increase their power to shape the world system. States are starved of tax revenues, grow weaker and retreat, and eventually it becomes a reinforcing spiral. National politics become captured by global money markets. And then next thing you know, you have an FBI infiltrating Twitter and clearly being paid by these same guys. This is money power. It's not just the FBI. You have to make the connection to the nexus from the FBI abusing power to what's pushing the FBI to do this stuff.
Right. It's called the bank.
It's not organic.
No, it's not organic at all.
No.
Not organic. This is what Anthony Sutton talked about. He went on and on that there was no left, there was no right, that what there was money power, and it was indiscriminate when it came to which side it wanted to move on, right? And so people get caught up in this left-right dialectic, and clearly there are values on the right that seem to be better than the values on the left, okay? We can make an easy argument for that. But really what it is, it's really just a costume party, and it's all about the money power. So this is at the heart of what Sutton is saying, or did say, and it's at the heart of your article here.
Yeah, then I kind of go into neoliberal Trotskyism. So neoliberalism is essentially Trotskyism refashioned for the needs of the global financial kleptocracy. Instead of proletariats of all countries unite, we have neoliberal elites of all countries unite. That's neoliberal Trotskyism.
Interesting.
And I have a link there to an article called Firebrand, Bolshevik, Leon Trotsky, fully backed by international banksters and the pederast British War Party. The link is, the article's there. I need to redo the link on the article and make sure it's a good link, but you can just enter it and search and find it. So anytime you see broken links on my articles, we have 1,200 articles, and it's pretty hard for me to, and I rerun them, and then I put links to other articles I've done, and sometimes they get kind of broken. Just take a little initiative and do a search. The articles are there. They haven't disappeared. They're just in a different URL.
Right. So you get into neoliberal newspeak, which is similar to Marxist newspeak. For example, the word free is redefined as unregulated. Isn't that interesting? That helps to provide pseudoscientific justification for redistributing wealth upward and increasing poverty for the lower 80% or so of the population endemic to the system. That's a really interesting.
And keep in mind, it's all about lording over people. That's what Strauss introduced. So when we talk about the mechanisms that they're using, like what you just said, redefining the words, it's also very much about lording over people and suppressing them and making sure their full potential really isn't brought to bear. And then so you have this drugged out sort of TikTok culture.
Right. Yep. The neoliberal state always evolves into the national security state. That's really interesting. You can even see that. I mean, there was a time when the Democrats were the anti-war party, and that ship has long since sailed. And they haven't met a war that they haven't gotten behind since Vietnam, really.
Yeah, it's just a rebrand of Bolshevism.
Yeah.
And Bolshevism was put in play by the Western bankers too, because they want centralized power. So when you get centralized power, you're able to really control people and resources much easier than in kind of a decentralized system or a national system or a regional system. It's a lot tougher to lord over, a local collective farm or a local market.
Right. It's much easier to manage large tranches of real estate and
And especially when you have
resources and power.
especially when you have a party nomenclatura or
Yeah.
a bureaucracy.
Well,
And so,
this is what Sutton again talked about. He said that one of the main reasons behind the Bolshevik Revolution was that the industrialists of the West wanted to control how Russia was going to develop economically and industrially. They wanted control of that process. And
yeah,
that's one of the reasons, right?
yep. And so instead of Communist International, we see the formation of the powerful transnational kleptocrat international. And that's what these guys like all these neocons are about. They play a real role in this.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a quote by up there at the top of the article. Let's just read that. Bruce Wilder in his book Clash of Autonomy and Interdependence, he says, "Is it really necessary for every economist to be a brain dead apologist for the rich and powerful and predatory in every damn breath?"
Yes.
Good
Yes.
quote. Good quote.
Yes. Because if there isn't and they don't, then that is not absolute power. They can't leave one scintilla of space. I mean, they can imagine it and they can manufacture it and they can be deceptive and give people the appearance that that's what they're doing. But at the end of the day, the answer to that question is no, they can't. They can't let up. There is no relief to this model.
No, it's amazing. The transnational kleptocrat no longer feels in the same boat as the rest of society and openly worships on the altar of unlimited pathological greed. As cosmopolitans, they have little loyalty and offer no support to host nations. The kleptocrats and their foundations of today are, in other words, open up the goddamn borders. Just
Right.
let people in. Just infest the school districts with a bunch of nutcases, mentally ill people.
Right. Yeah.
And I always wonder, why is it that this wealthy class never steps up to the plate? Where they're not to be seen. Maybe Elon Musk is a little bit now and kind of revealing this Twitter files. We'll see, but that's pretty rare. You just don't see these people step up to the plate.
No, and so there are a couple of thoughts around that. And I wanted to I'm glad you brought Musk back up again, because one of the things that has crossed my mind with Musk, and if you think about him, Jack Dorsey, Peter Thiel, some of these Silicon Valley guys who have made a shit ton of money, right? They're younger than their predecessors. They're not the scions of the international globalist, banking mafia. They don't come out of Wall Street like Larry Fink or Jamie Dimon or Lloyd Blankfein, right? They're not from that group. And that group is connected to, Rothschild, Federal Reserve, fiat money lending, and then some. So when you look at guys like that, right, I think they're looking around and they're asking themselves, what does our future and our future for potential wealth hold against this other group who's been around much longer than we have? And unless we theoretically work with them, they will take our resources away from us, because this is what happens. This is why you don't see like super rich guys come to the table. I think Ross Perot might have fit the mold for a minute there, but the really super wealthy don't come to the table because they know that through a few quick measures and the strokes of a pen, they're done. I mean, look what's happened with Kanye West.
Exactly. And it may be happening to Elon Musk, because his bank account has gone down. His net worth has really dropped.
So I think to your point that there is a group like guys like Thiel, and Elon Musk and Jack Dorsey, and who knows who else, right, that look around and say, look, we're kind of in the Wild West here with this other group that's older, they have older money, and they've got to figure out a way to either equalize their positions or even turn the tables. That I've considered, because I do think that Strauss is right to some degree, that everybody is self-interested, right? I think there's some truth to that. So if Musk has any degree of self-interest, as does Peter Thiel, as does Jack Dorsey, they're going to try to figure out a way to stay in the game and make sure that this other group doesn't hijack, their shit, right? And so that creates a dynamic and a dynamic tension. So I think that's worth watching as we evolve through this whole kind of evolutionary piece.
Well, I mean, I hate to be, I hate to be cynical all the time, so I'm kind of applauding Elon Musk.
Yeah.
I'm kind of tired of just constantly being cynical. So,
right. Well, like I said, I do think that we're looking at kind of a breakaway group. I mean, who knows? Maybe you throw Jeff Bezos in there too. I don't know. And I'm not here to defend these people, but I do know that they are not coming from the same kind of crime wave as this other group came from, and that they may have some vested interest in that group, and that group may have some vested interest in them.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, it is about dominance and consolidation. And I think the younger generation, they're all guys that are, Gen Xers. I think Peter Thiel was born in 1964. I could be wrong. But, these are the guys like Jack Dorsey. I think Jack Dorsey, I'm not a huge Jack Dorsey fan, but I think it was pretty clear at a certain point, he was held hostage at Twitter, and he tried to keep the jackals at bay. And he couldn't do that. He lost control of it. But when you listen
did he lose control of it? My God, he just had.
Yeah. But when you listen,
he must. I'm wondering if he must have contacted Elon Musk secretly and says, "You want to take over?"
Well, I think so this gets back to what I'm saying. I mean, I think these guys are working together. I think you have Dorsey, because Elon Musk has been doing these live streams with Dorsey a lot lately, and talking about Twitter and talking about, Dorsey, they're going on and on about decentralization, the creation of their own economy. I mean, these guys have a different point of view, and you could say, well, they could be tools for the old money and bring people in and get them all, hot and sweaty about the fact that they're different than the group that's gone before them. And that could be possibly true too. But my experience, and Russ, you could probably chime in on this, is that I think, the world is just run by these crime families. And these crime families will work together, but every now and then they'll have these turf wars. And because we've seen this in the quote unquote real world with like the Genovesas and, the various Italian mobs, right?
They're all kept in line by the intelligence agencies. So at some point in time, the Straussians, if you want to call them that, or the Sabatian Frankists, I call them, captured all these intelligence agencies, the big ones, the big five or whatever you want to call them. And they can kind of keep everybody in line because they're very surreptitious, and they just kind of, people die, people get into plane crashes, things like that.
Yeah, that's true. There's been at least 3 crypto, like, ultra multimillionaires that have died recently.
And so, like you said, the neoliberal state always evolves into a national security state, and that's clearly what's happened. So the doctrine is artificially constructed by bribed intellectuals and a network of foundation-funded neoliberal think tanks. The use of the term think tank as a major weapon for unleashing neoliberal tyranny was also a direct borrowing from Bolshevik practice. They used that term. They created think tanks. And so then I have further reading, the OSS, the Frankfurt School brought, AKA the News School, brought in by William Langer, the CIA, and infested the Ivy League in particular. And then I've got a whole bunch of articles on foundations.
Those are the crime family fronts. That's exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah. The Clinton Foundation, just the tip of the iceberg. When the curtain was pulled back on the maze of foundation activities, the controlled neoliberal media crushed coverage like a bug. Neoliberal doctrine is built and enforced by, quote unquote, the party. Party hides behind a contrived left-right dialectic and circus clown world politics. Both the GOP, and especially Trump and the Democrats, are hardcore neoliberals, and for all practical purposes are the party. The party is Machiavellian and uses cult-style methods. There's an obsessive preoccupation with getting to power and staying in power, by any means, criminal if necessary. Instincts are psychopathic. There's a blatant disregard to fact and truth in order to achieve a political victory. Ain't that the truth?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, my God, I mean, Biden, he actually puts, I mean, Biden is just like a whole new category of fact and truth.
Right. Well, once I have to be careful how I phrase this. Once we witness the David Copperfield-esque version of the 2020 election, that was it. It's like, it's out in the open, it's in your face. We don't care. We're going to lie. We're going to lie straight to your face. And then we'll change the lie 2 or 3 days or 2 or 3 weeks later, and then we'll lie again. Like, that's where it is now. And that's all post 2020.
Yeah, it's just a blatant disregard of facts and truth. They view political activities as a war, a fight to the bitter end. False flags and bamboozle staged deception operations are the norm. Wedge issue. I mean, the wedge issue is the big thing too. That's how they brainwash.
Describe the wedge issue. What do you mean by that?
Oh, like there's some controversial issues, but really, is abortion, is that really the centerpiece of what we're talking about here in terms of politics?
Right.
It may be a representative moral issue, but it's kind of a wedge issue.
So you define wedge issue as an issue that divides people.
Right. It gets everybody riled up.
Right.
And distracted.
Well, they can make those up, right? I mean, 10 years ago was
like the racism charge. That's a classic example.
Racism, and now we have transgender equity. Like, that did not exist 10 years ago. So they've now cooked up a new wedge issue. They could just make these things out of thin air, and with enough propaganda, they can just beat that drum right into people's heads.
And it's actually stupid. I mean, I sent you that article written by that Olivia Waxman of Time Magazine, right?
Yep.
You see that?
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
Where she writes an article at exercise and gymnastic, I don't know, athleticism and working out, pumping iron, whatever, is white supremacist.
Yeah.
I mean, that takes a lot of chutzpah to say something like that, but they just blurt it out. And boy, did she get attacked on Twitter. I have never seen anybody railed on more than her.
What do these people think? I mean, are they ensconced in their, little private Idahos, and that they know that ultimately they take the heat on Twitter for 48, 72 hours, and then it subsides and they just go back to their everyday life?
Strategy is, but it's got to be part of the wedge thing, where they could just get a little wedge thrown out there and take one for the team. But this gal was an honor student at Columbia University. But we're going to talk about Columbia University in a minute. It's a cesspool. How did she even get hired to be a writer for Time Magazine?
Oh, well, yeah. That's a whole other.
Yeah, she's a member of the tribe is kind of the answer.
Whole other discussion. Yeah, people being elevated very quickly without the representative credentials. It happens a lot more than we think.
So the party gets too preoccupied with dividing spoils among friends and corporate sponsors to effectively govern. High positions are populated with revolving door flying monkeys with ideologically correct views, or who have a zero or near zero abilities to perform. I call them sub-zeros or negative selection. So I kind of use this term sub-zeros a lot. Mm-hmm. And boy, there's a lot of sub-zeros running the show. Along with fake promises, Machiavellians try to use militarism and jingoism as a unifying force for the nation. They also provide cover for a ragtag collection of lobbyists serving the interest of military industrial surveillance complex. And surveillance is an important word to use there. Wall Street and Israel. Yep. The ultimate outcome of this could very well be civil war. Christopher Hayes noted the spark is a national mood of exhaustion, frustration, and betrayal at near total failure of each pillar institution of our society. So that's pretty much the ideas of, there's a chart down there. The top 10%, 0.1% now own more than the bottom 80%. Wow. Pretty successful program. This whole neoliberal economy has really done a number. And look at the trajectory up since the mid 1970s, just consistently.
1990 is a huge upturn, or like you're seeing the upturn here, but it just goes parabolic in 1990, and that's 1990 is kind of the height or the nadir of the Bush administration. And what's interesting is that we were in a big time recession during that time. So it's interesting. Some people were making a lot of money in 1990, and a lot of people weren't, because here we go, right? You can see the downturn in 1990. This is where the fortunes are reversed, right there. And then this is where the Clintons come in.
And then the market crash in 2001, that got the Federal Reserve printing money. And then the financial crisis was a major victory for these criminals.
Yep.
To just loot. And that's how they do it. They create crises like in the Ukraine, and then all of a sudden Larry Fink shows up. So they're going to apply the method to that particular country. And probably most Americans don't really care, because it's more of a slogan than any particular care for the people there. I'm the opposite. I care for these Ukrainians. I'm not interested in slogans, sloganeering.
Right. And there are Ukrainians that are not down with Zelensky, right? Not everybody, but a large number of people seem to think that they're all down with Ukrainian nationalism and the war movement. And that's not true. I mean, there are guys that are being forced at gunpoint to go out and be cannon fodder, and they don't want to do it. And a lot of people don't understand that. They just get into this sloganeering, and it's the next thing, right? It's like
the next thing, yeah. So basically, the Democrat politics and theatrics has been reduced to only one lone senator, Manchin. So you got one guy that's fiscally responsible for the whole Democratic Party. How's that possible?
Yeah, I think when that plane with Paul Wellstone went down, the conscience of the Democratic Party went down.
Yep, that was a key assassination.
Yep.
So what's protection for the 99% are removed? Globalization and financialization were just forces that just happened. Weaponized migration serves the neoliberal kakistocracy in two ways. It destabilizes and weakens the national sovereignty as a bulwark to protect existing citizens, and it keeps the wages of the 90% depressed and their costs high. And it's interesting now. People are just quitting work. Older people, they're just disappearing. They're disappearing from the workforce. So it's backfired on them.
Well, this was a big deal in 2020. When all the stuff was going down, because there were legacy programmers and guys that have been running computer systems since the 1970s. These are guys that are my age, and even to some extent your age. You're not that much older than I am. So they've been around, right? And they're like, fuck this. I don't need this anymore. And they walked out. And so when you look at, did you hear what happened with Southwest Airlines over the last few days here?
Yeah, they just grounded everything. Don't have enough staff, do they?
That was not the problem. The problem was their computer systems.
Oh,
they had plenty of staff. They had flight crews. They were ready to go, but their computer system melted down, and they could not process the people in the flights. That's, I think, part of this migration away from people who started those legacy systems. We're done.
Well, it's also slash and burn, because a lot of these companies have a model of not really investing back into their business, the capex, to keep them functioning well.
Yeah.
Because it's all about the next earnings and beating the earnings report. So you don't want to have too much money being spent on upgrades of your computer system.
Well, they can't replace the brain trust that created that stuff, has run that stuff and upgraded and updated. They're gone. Right? They're gone. And this new generation that comes in, number one, they're trained on different code systems, right? Those old guys are learning on COBOL, they're learning on Fortran. You know, the new breed doesn't even know what the hell COBOL and Fortran is. And they also have different ideas about work and ethic and automation. So they just can't come right in and say, okay, well, you know, Joe's been here for 40 years or 35 years and knows this thing inside out. Let's get somebody from Stanford to come in here and fix this. First of all, the kid from Stanford is not going to want that job. It's not going to pay enough. The kid from Stanford wants to go hang out in the valley and start an app and get funded, right? So to your point, and this is, I think this is what happened with Southwest, is that they ran into a crunch where the people that built their system in terms of computers, it hit kind of this critical mass, and they didn't have the brain trust or the people power to keep this thing up and running. So I think we'll wind up seeing more of that, because that gets into your point where these people are just walking away.
Yeah. So the other thing about this kakistocracy that's very clear is that the central banking is practiced by the kakistocracy, keeps borrowing costs for the kleptocracy very low. They can always borrow cheap at the discount window. Even now, even with interest rates up a bit, they can still access cheap money.
Right.
And just bring a little collateral and no questions asked. And they just keep these zombies afloat. A lot of zombies right now in the economy. But strangely, however, these low borrowing costs are never passed on to consumer loans, which remain usurious. So they've got usury going on the population in general. 20%, 18% or higher interest rates.
Right.
And so at least for a while, until very recently, the savers were crucified and subjected to negative rates or zero rates. Kleptocrats play the arbitrage of the spread, and their takings keep compounding while members of the broader society are like hamsters on a treadmill. Perfect Straussian neoliberal practice there, usury. Yeah, there's a kind of a reason that they outlawed usury in the medieval period.
Oh, there's absolute reason why. I mean,
it needs to be really regulated.
Yeah. What's interesting is that the Muslims have a very different practice of banking. Like, they don't do interest-based loans. They have a whole different model. I don't know the ins and outs of it, but I know that that's an intrinsic part of their belief system, is to not be engaged in interest-based lending. I don't know how the Saudis run it, but we got a group out there that's doing it. It seems
it's a different kind of system. The neocons and neoliberals don't like a different kind of system. They want it all globalized under their scheme. Totally. Right. So you take a country like Libya. There's a good example of how they steamrolled a country. You got 99% of the people were just doing fine under a different kind of system. So the neoliberals hire the mercenaries and takes the country down, and not feeling content with just that, they then organize weaponized migration, whereby most African migrants are looted, killed, and slaves. And then the traffickers have the audacity to cry about passion.
Right.
So, for every 1 out of 5 or 1 out of 4 that makes it to Europe, makes it to Italy, there's a lot of dead carcasses back in the desert.
Right. Yep. Yeah. Yeah. The whole thing with Libya is a great example of the neoliberal, neocon war state plunder. And they didn't like the independent system. They didn't like what Gaddafi was serving up. And Gaddafi who at one point in time was a radical and, harbored people that were theoretically considered terrorists, enemies of the state. For Gaddafi, they were people that were pushing it back against the system. And then he flipped, right? He flipped. I think what did they do? Reagan did kind of a missile strife. He survived that, came back, had that plastic surgery. Remember his face? It was all,
Yeah, well,
altered.
that's what they do.
Yeah.
The money power, which is the bastion of these neoliberals, can bully most poor countries into adopting neoliberal policies. So that's what they did with Gaddafi. But apparently it wasn't enough because there was some kind of looting opportunity. I think it was probably related to money, creating new money for the Africans. Can't have that.
No, can't have independence. And they went in and they laid waste to Libya.
Yeah, and there's just no justification for that at all. I mean, anybody that hasn't looked at that story, that's a big story.
It's huge. And then prior to that, they laid waste to Baghdad. And whatever you think of Saddam Hussein, Baghdad was a model of kind of, European, Middle Eastern synthesis and culture. And people were doing well in Baghdad, right? I mean, they were doing all right. They women, it was not a repressive regime. If you're a woman, you didn't have to wear a hijab. You could wear a skirt. You could go to university. And then look what happens. They just blasted back to the Middle Ages.
And then acting like you're going to really benefit this population when really it's just all about squishing them like bugs.
And then copping their resources, copping their oil.
So, okay, then they've got, I don't know, that pretty much covers, geez, that's a long article.
It's a good one.
My God, I really railed. Another nasty manifestation of the kleptocrat neoliberal misdirection is white privilege.
It ties a lot together. Yeah, the white privilege.
And deplorable and dear fellow white person scam. This takes aims at lower stratus white people who are barely staying above water. So let's just pile some more garbage on these people.
Right. Who was it? Ketanji Brown Jackson. I guess they call her what, KJB now, or KBJ or whatever her name is. The new Supreme Court justice. She's claimed that It's a Wonderful Life is racist.
Yeah.
There's one scene, I think, in It's a Wonderful Life where they have a train porter who happens to be black, and she's interpreted that as being racist.
So basically you have a justice who's clearly a turtle on the fence post, creating a wedge issue for no reason at all. There's no reason for this stuff any more than this nonsense in Time magazine about exercise being white supremacy.
And she has been nothing but the recipient of white privilege all the way through college and even marrying her Boston Brahmin, supposedly white husband, right? I mean, she is a classic example of somebody who has really benefited from the system.
About her, but
I do. I know plenty about her. So, yeah, I mean, but here she is now taking her, proletariat talking points to the Supreme Court.
Right. And so then I'm saying neoliberal nomenclature is very similar to communist nomenclature. In both cases, positions in the social hierarchy is by and large determined by the position the individual has in government, military, or private industry. And then I have, for further reading, which we discussed before, UK Prime Minister David Cameron's great-grandfathers were Rothschild-connected banksters who financed the Russo-Japanese War. Remember that conversation?
Oh, yeah.
And an article, Who is William Pelham Barr? I mean, what a funny background he has. And then, we're probably not even going to be able to get into it today. There's Madeleine Albright.
Oh, she's... I
hope people.
Yeah, Madeleine Albright. I hope she's roasting on a pit somewhere, on a spit. I mean, that woman was brutal, absolutely brutal. And, put in charge of large swaths of international global policy and kind of shielded behind the fact that she was a woman. And it's like, okay, well, if it's a
she's
woman, that's not bad.
she's another foreigner. Why is it that Zig Brzezinski from Poland and Madeleine Albright from Czechoslovakia just all of a sudden get inserted into these key neocon, neoliberal positions of power?
I think that's the Kissinger effect. Once Kissinger got inserted into the Nixon White House, it opened the door for all these other people.
Right.
You know, why do we have to stick with people that were educated at Princeton and Harvard and Columbia? Let's get some of these other people in here because they have no allegiance to the country whatsoever. Granted, some of these other people that came through Skull and Bones, they don't have any allegiance to the country either. They're part of the money power. This is what Sutton talks about.
Well, Albright's, her key talking point was "quote unquote" championing human rights and democracy across the globe. And you can just create any kind of narrative you want out of that.
You've got there's a special place in hell for Madeleine Albright. Yeah. Oh,
so PBS described her as, quote, a child refugee from Nazi and then Soviet-dominated Eastern Europe who rose to become the first female Secretary of State and a mentor to many current and former American statesmen and women, adding that she was a lifelong Democrat who nevertheless worked to bring Republicans into her orbit. In other words, neocon Republicans.
She's a ghoul. The woman's a ghoul.
Yeah, there's the famous interview where she's asked about all the death and starvation in Iraq, and she says, "Well, it's just something we need to do." And here's a little background on her. So her dad, first of all, she's Jewish,
right?
Although they kind of conveniently converted, like the Careys did, to Catholicism,
right?
And somehow Madeleine Albright didn't know anything about that. Another one of those deals.
Yep.
So he was a diplomat.
Is it Thomas Albright? Is that her father? What's his father? What's your father's name?
His name was Joseph. Jewish parents, Anna Spiegel and Joseph Korbel, who was the press attaché of the Czechoslovakian embassy in Belgrade, Serbia, and then went to London and kind of helped form their government in exile. And the Washington Post reported on Albright's Jewish ancestry shortly after she had become Secretary of State in 1997. And Albright said that the report was a major surprise, asserted that she did not learn until age 59 that both of her parents were born and raised in Jewish families. And then I have a link to the article, The Sordid Family History of James Forbes Carey, where they just picked the name Carey on a map and recreated themselves.
Right. So you can haunt the same alleys and streets as Madeleine Albright there in Prague.
I saw her. First year I was here, I saw her up at the castle.
Was that like staring into the face of Medusa?
Oh, she's a little woman, and she had a little entourage with her. 4 or 5 people walking with her. She was walking out. I probably had some meeting, probably with the president of the Czech Republic, who lives up there. That's where the offices are, at least the president's office.
Right.
So I don't think she was up there as a tourist. She was up there
doing business.
I just walked right by her. Yeah.
So is this her as a child here?
Yeah. The Germans occupied Czechoslovakia. Korbel was forced into exile because of his ties to Edward Bennis. And so Albright later called the occupation of Czechoslovakia a symbol of the West impotence and division. So she was able to kind of point to that as a rallying call for all of her misconduct around the world.
Right. So she's like the female Czech Jewish version of Brzezinski, who's Polish. right? Like she's kind.
Well,
She's
Brzezinski was her mentor.
there. You go. Yeah.
Yeah, that's Brzezinski was her mentor. And so the story goes that it was during this time in 1941 that Korbel's parents died in the Holocaust and he converted to Catholicism. It's kind of a strange story.
Right.
And so then after the war, they returned to Prague, and then Venice, by decree, just expelled all the Germans from Czechoslovakia, including the Bohemian German industrialist Karl Liebknecht. And Venice gave Liebknecht's luxurious apartment to Korbel, including its furnishings and artwork. And I went up and saw that it's not really an apartment; it's a house, kind of a house. I don't know quite how to describe it. I saw it because it's on a street where I used to go to my old urologist.
Right.
So they just looted this German industrial's property and gave it to Albright.
Interesting.
Yeah, I don't know if that's a digression or not, but it just kind of points to a certain attitude.
Well, no, I think it's a mindset, right? I mean, it's a microcosm of a mindset. I mean, isn't that what's going on globally?
Yeah. And so then Korbel, who's the dad, gets a grant from the Rockefeller Foundation and begins teaching international politics at the University of Denver in 1950. So you can just kind of come from Europe and just move right on in and get a big professorship at an American university. That's how it works.
I think Golda Meir taught at the University of Denver too.
Oh, okay. So there's sort of a so
It's
Korbel worked
like a pipeline, I think.
So Madeline, whose name then was Korbel, she changed her name to Albright, worked as an intern at the Denver Post, where she met and started a relationship with Joseph Patterson Albright. He's the nephew of the publisher Alicia Patterson, the owner of Newsday, and the wife of diplomat and publisher Harry Guggenheim, Joseph's great-great-grandfather, who owned Joseph Medal, who owned the Chicago Tribune and served as mayor of Chicago. So she married up.
Interesting.
This sounds exactly like Kerry. That's exactly what he did too. Kind of married into this elite family.
Right. Yeah. Wow.
So these are not bootstrap people.
No. This is so. I just went to Golda Meir's Wikipedia page just to refresh my memory about her relation with Denver. So in 1912, she began studying at North Division High School and worked part-time. Her employers included Schuster's department store and the Milwaukee Public Library. That's where Golda Meir is from. She's from Milwaukee. Her mother wanted Golda to leave school and marry, but she declined. She bought a train ticket to Denver, Colorado, and went to live with her married sister, Shana Korngold. The Korngolds held intellectual evenings at their home, where Meir was exposed to debates on Zionism, literature, women's suffrage, trade unionism, and more. In her autobiography, she wrote, "To the extent that my own future convictions were shaped and given from those talk-field nights in Denver, played a considerable role." In Denver, she also met Morris Meyerson, who's from Chicago. So we get into Leo Strauss territory here. A sign painter whom she married on December 24th.
A sign painter, though. Okay.
Yeah,
That's a little different.
Yeah. But so Denver, interesting kind of territory there.
Well, okay. So let's take a look at her dad again, Joseph Korbel. So he established the Graduate School for International Studies at the University of Denver, became its founding dean. One of his students was, drum roll please, Condoleezza Rice.
Horrible.
Another turtle on the fence post. And so David Ignatius of the Washington Post wrote, whenever Rice spoke of Korbel, she expressed genuine passion, and it sometimes appeared that, and I have this in bold, the foreign policy elite was really an extended family. His words, not mine. So then she goes to college to study political science and Russian. She earns an MA and then insts her way into a PhD. And under Columbia professor Zig Brzezinski, who later became her boss, mentor, and friend. Now we got to back up, and we could go into all of her bumbling, the Rwanda genocide. Her track record is poor.
Right.
There's nothing here to brag about. Diplomatic wars worth it. Secretary of State. But let's back up a minute and let's take a look at Brzezinski. So he's a professor at Columbia, Harvard, and all the international cesspools. He was a member of the Council of Foreign Relations. And with him, what I'd really like to do is just go down and read you some of the things he spewed out of his mouth. Because other than that, it's just the same garbage. The tool of human rights is a convenient and rather cynical propaganda and premise for regime change and manipulation. And this was applied selectively against leaders in the internationalist crosshairs. So if you were playing ball, you were a dictator playing ball with the internationalists and the globalists, no problem.
Right. Well, so for a while, until they decided they had no use for you. Right. Like Saddam Hussein played ball with them. He took on Iran, and he did, and the Shah of Iran played ball with them for a while. You had Omar Torrijos from Panama playing ball. They always turn on him.
Yeah, but after 9/11, they had an excuse or an opening to destabilize the Middle East. And
absolutely.
So that's what that was all about. It really wasn't so much about Hassan. It's just an excuse to destabilize that region.
But they would always, no matter. I mean, even a guy like Mubarak, who was, their lapdog in Egypt, at a certain point, they're like, you're done. You're done. You're out of here. We're creating a hunger strike because we raised the price of flour. People are revolting. We're gonna try to throw in the Muslim Brotherhood. Oh, too bad. The military intervened. Right. Yeah. So I mean, it's like there's no job security if you're a globalist lapdog. I mean, there's just none.
Not really.
They'll come get you at some point. Yeah.
So Brzezinski is one of the foremost advocates of NATO expansion. So when Russia kind of disintegrated, he right away started pushing for, bringing Poland in, all these Eastern European countries, starting encroaching into the Russian sphere. And he promoted the Putin as a menace narrative real heavily. So he was front and center on that early on when it really wasn't that big of a narrative.
Yeah.
But he says he suggested the key to keeping Russia weak and on the defensive. Quote, Russia's only real geostrategic option, the option that would give Russia a realistic international role and also maximize the opportunity of transforming and socially modernizing itself, is Europe. The key point to bear in mind is that Russia cannot be in Europe without Ukraine also being in Europe, whereas Ukraine could be in Europe without Russia being in Europe. So it's again dictating the role and direction that countries take. That's what globalism is.
Right. And they're parasitic because they come to the United States, they tap into the United States military industrial complex, the United States tax base, and their ability to hold sway over congressmen and senators and whatever political offices in power at the time. And they have absolutely zero affection or affiliation for the United States, aside from what they can get out of it.
Yeah, or use it to hammer on other people around
that's
the world.
it, whatever, right? I mean, that's like, go use your army over here, go play the bully, and then we'll take care of the rest. We'll help with the destabilization, we'll soften them up. You go in, you bring the army in, and then we'll divvy up the resources. I mean, these guys like Brzezinski or Albright, to your point, Russ, they are these globalists that only value power and money. That's it. Power and money.
Yeah, they're working for the money power.
Yeah. And I think
they're flying monkeys. They're not really as important as people as they're made out to be. They're just they're puppets on a string, carrying out
well,
whatever.
Brzezinski, and it's like I haven't read his works, but there's a reason why he was kept around by a number of administrations. It's because he was pretty smart, and he kind of understood. He wrote that book Between Two Ages in the Technotronic Era. That's 1970. That's way ahead of what other people are writing about. He's talking about information warfare. He's talking about the war of ideas. I mean, I think Brzezinski was a very smart guy, and he was ruthless. He was cold-blooded.
Well, he knew which side his bread was buttered, because he talks about these elites all the time. He overuses the term elites, who are clearly the mega corporation, oligarchs, international banksters. That's basically his masters. And here's a line from his book that you just mentioned, Between the Two Ages, his book.
Yep.
The nation state as a fundamental unit of man's organized life has ceased to be the principal creative force. International banks and multinational corporations are acting and planning in terms that are far in advance of the political concept of the nation state. Right. That's a pretty amazing comment, man.
1970?
That's what he said in his book.
That's right. So Brzezinski, there's a reason why they kept him around, because whatever you think of his, quote unquote, evil nature, if you're opposed to corporations and globalism and those incarnations or iterations, he was smart. The guy's fucking smart, right? He's way out in front of where things are going and able to map it out in a way that these think tanks and the guys at the military industrial complex companies like Rand and DynCorp, they lap this stuff up. They're into it. Right.
Yeah, he just gave them their marching orders to his books.
Yes, it's just candy. It's mind candy for these people.
Okay, so I also note that he was also a prime designer of mind control of the masses. His ideas of pre-crisis management are seen to be the prescient for FEMA.
Yep.
And once again, he never minced words. Here we go again. He says, political strategists are tempted to exploit research on the brain and human behavior. Geophysicist Gordon MacDonald, specialist in problems of warfare, says accurately timed, artificially excited electronic strokes could lead to a pattern of oscillations that produce relatively high power levels over certain regions of the Earth. In this way, one could develop a system that would seriously impair the brain performance of very large populations in selected regions over an extended period. No matter how deeply disturbing the thought of using environment to manipulate behavior for advantage, to some, the technologies permitting such use will probably develop within the next few decades. And I have a picture of Dr. Strangelove for the
yes.
That's my little meme, Dr. Strangelove, a Brzezinski lookalike. I mean, doesn't that sound like something Dr. Strangelove would say?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
And here we see his interest in Big Brother mass surveillance. The technotronic era involves the gradual appearance of a more controlled society. Such a society would be dominated by an elite, unrestrained by traditional values, right out of Straussianism. Soon it will be possible to assert almost continuous surveillance over every citizen and maintain up-to-date complete files containing even the most personal information about the citizen. These files will be subjected to instantaneous retrieval by the authorities. And so it's just right out of Aldous Huxley.
Oh, absolutely. So I'm going to go off script a little bit here. I want to give people a little taste of Brzezinski. And I think I'm going cold on this, but it's connected to Libya, which we were just talking about. And I'm just going to play a little video clip of Brzezinski, so people understand kind of who we're talking about here. So let's just see where this goes. Because this guy is Dr. Strangelove. He is the personification of an evil genius. And they loved him, right? I got to go back. Give me 1 second here. the global elites, the money power loved him because he didn't have any morals. He didn't have any real scruples. All right, here we go. This is from CNN. He's talking about Libya. This is from 11 years ago. Let's see what he has to say.
And we are back. Joining me now is Zbigniew Brzezinski. He was National Security Advisor under President Jimmy Carter, now a professor at the Johns Hopkins School of Advanced International Studies. Welcome back to the show, Zbig.
Good to see you, Fareed.
We are in a stalemate, it appears. You were in favor of this intervention. You argued that it would send a politically damaging signal in the Arab world for the United States to have stood by while a slaughter took place. But now we're in a situation that seems somewhat predictable. That is that neither side has the ability to win, and the United States is sort of in the middle here. What should we do?
Well, first of all, I think we have to face the fact that if we hadn't acted, today Gaddafi would be standing astride the Middle East as a most successful anti-American, defiant, and hostile leader. So we have avoided that. But now we have to make certain that he doesn't stick around. And I'm concerned that time is not on our side. The longer this thing lasts, the more likely he's end up entrenched in at least half of Libya. So I think we have to push. And while caution and restraint are the proper words, especially since we need the support of the Arab League, in fact, there are a lot of things we can be doing, I suspect we are doing, in any case we should be doing, to make certain that he doesn't stick around. Okay,
so this is an older version of him, but he's basically telling people that he's advocating that the Obama administration go in and take care of Libya and Gaddafi. And that's exactly what they did.
Yeah, regime change. And then exactly left them high and dry.
And I remember I did an article on my website when he got hired by the Obama administration. I'm like, what is going on here, right? Like, we're going to find out a lot about Obama by who he hires and what his actions are in the first 90 days of his regime. And he hires a big new Brzezinski.
And then brings in Alden Albright, his student.
That's right. That's right. So Obama being an extension of the neoliberal neocon cadre. And that's, so what you saw on CNN is essentially what Brzezinski's role was. He's telling people this is what we need to do. It's exactly what happened.
Yeah, here's proof that he doesn't really care about the United States. He's acting like it's like the beacon of democracy. He kind of plays that little game. Right. And then he says later in his strategic vision, America and the crisis of global power, he says, the world has become more aware that America, despite being the hope of many who have had the personal drive and ambition to become part of the American dream, is beset by serious operational challenges, a massive and growing national debt, widening social inequity, a cornucopian culture that worships materialism, and a financial system given to greedy speculation and polarized political system. So he defines the problem well, but listen to his solution. This regionalization is keeping up with the trilateral plan, which calls for a gradual convergence of East and West, ultimately leading to the goal of one world government. National sovereignty is no longer a viable concept. So first he just craps all over the United States and making pretty accurate statements, but why is the United States that way? He doesn't really address that, does he?
No. The United States is that way is because people like Brzezinski, his cohorts, his predecessors, and his partners in crime helped de-evolutionize the country in that direction.
And like have done all over the world, every kind of anybody that presents a challenge to them, there's a little bit advancing. So the idea of the American foreign policy is defined by Kissinger, Brzezinski, Albright, all these neocons, is to suppress the progress of the whole world, really, Americans included, and just make sure that people just aren't, they're just. In fact, here's what he says: The United States is moving into an era unlike any of its predecessors. We're moving towards a technotronic era that could easily become a dictatorship. Our society is now in an information revolution based on amusement focus, spectator spectacles, saturation covered by television of sporting events, which provides an opiate for an increasingly purposeless mass. Persisting social crisis and the emergence of charismatic personality and the exploitation of mass media to obtain public confidence would be the stepping stones in the piecemeal transformation of the United States into a highly controlled society. Well, that's probably the next step for the United States that he's describing.
What's interesting is I saw that paragraph. I didn't look beyond that paragraph. And I thought to myself, he's talking about Trump. And then the next line, you have Brzezinski seemed to have the memo on Donald Trump well ahead of time. Yeah, absolutely. Right. So
he says we have a large public that is very ignorant about public affairs and very susceptible to simplistic slogans by candidates who appear out of nowhere, have no track record, but mouth appealing slogans.
He's not
really
wrong.
Where did you come up with that one, man?
He's not wrong.
Did somebody give you the memo or something? You know, I know you're a smart guy, Zib, but where did you come up with that?
Well, I think that part of his intelligence is a byproduct of a group mind. But these are ideas that are tossed around in think tanks. Right. So they're probably, some of them are probably his, and some of them probably came out of the mouths of post-Straussians.
Yeah, pretty sickening. So then we have
he hated the internet, by the way.
Really?
He thought, he wanted to shut the internet down.
Yeah, because it's too many weird ideas. So but what they did is they suppressed it anyway. They found ways around it.
They figured out the algorithm and then creating social stigmas.
And then got the FBI in there running the censorship at places like Twitter. So there was a workaround on that. But yeah, right, the internet would be a threat. So
he was not a fan.
So he probably got people working on that right away. You know, let's get our cadre in place to deal with the internet.
Yeah. So they've done a pretty good job with that. Rockefeller hated the internet too. Rockefeller thought it was dangerous. It's like, well, we got to shut this down. It's, there's too many divergent ideas. Well, Russ, we got about 15 minutes left in the show, and it seems like we're only about halfway through this very deep and dense subject matter. I'm wondering if we should have a part 2 for the next time you come on the show.
Yeah, we could probably pick up some of it. I mean, I could probably summarize it. I think that this Barnett plan maybe summarizes it. Okay. I think everybody knows the thread we're going on. It's this constant interference without just cause. Inserting yourselves in
the Barnett plan here.
Okay, so there's a book called The Pentagon's New Map by Thomas Barnett, which is a continuation of I call it the New Underworld Order plan of Kalergi.
Right.
And so I say I will dissect my own reading of this unfortunately influential but god-awful book. So he was asked by the United States Air Force to give indoctrination presentation to every new officer who attained the rank of general. So they're indoctrinating their top cadre with this.
Yeah.
Bringing this jerk in? Really? So he moves on to become chief analyst for the Israeli geostrategic analysis think tank Wikistrat. Who'd have thunk? Another rabbit hole topic in itself. He's currently at Terra and is writing for Esquire. So he provided a precise strategy for establishing what appeared to the masses as a global socialist democracy, but in reality, it will be a global kakistocracy. So he just came right out of Trotsky and inserted that philosophy.
So we're talking Bernard Lewis.
No, we're not talking about Barnett.
Barnett, okay. Barnett.
Bernard Lewis is just a hatchet. He's a hatchet guy. He's a boogeyman creator. That was his main role, creating boogeymen. Writing about these inferior cultures and And the guy had never been to the Middle East in 40 years, didn't know these countries at all, but he was a huge critic of it. And he, all the usual suspects sold his books and gave him a big audience and cheerled him. That's the summary of the charlatan Bernard Lewis.
So am I on the right part of your site for the Barnett stuff? This is the link you gave me.
I sent that to you late. The article's called The Barnett Plan. If you enter Barnett Plan, it could pop up. The Pentagon's dead-end map for neocon globalism.
Let me do that. Because that was the link you sent me. Let me do the Barnett Plan.
Yeah, I kind of sent it to you before we came on the air, kind of late. But what Barnett's doing is he's saying, you military guys, you're the sistema. I use the word sistema, Spanish, Portuguese word for system, as the linchpin to carry out the new underworld order. Underlying this is the drinking the Kool-Aid that the United States, in its current quite satanic Disney-like clown world construct, has something to offer for people living in what Burnett called the gap. So you see the supremacism?
Yeah.
You label a third of the world, half the world, whatever, and call them the gap. And they're the inferior people out there.
Right.
And the United States, and the way these guys want to use the United States as a tool, is going to run herd over all this stuff. So his primary snake oil and comforting lies are that the United States has a system to sell to the rest of the world. Democracy. I say it'll be central bank enabled runaway debt, usury problems, expanding war problems, drone assassination problems, vast income wealth inequity problem, Wall Street looting problem, a domestic rule by sub-zero tyranny, an NDAA FISA spying problem, a satanic entertainment and porno industry problem, ad nauseum. You can just go down the page. That's what he wants to sell the gap.
Right. Right. Yeah.
So what if somebody in the gap says, screw you?
Right. Yeah.
Then you send the goons after him.
Right.
And so the new underworld order seems to be out of the ideas. And when they're out of ideas, they usually fall back on what they do best, telling lies and manipulating public opinion against some chosen enemy. In other words, military aggression. That's the snake oil Barnett sells. So he's a salesman for the military industrial surveillance complex. And I said, for those of you that might call me unpatriotic or an anti-American person, I can only retort, if your country is treating you like shit, and there's been nonstop bombing and regime changes around for decades, then look carefully. It may no longer be your country, but rather a hijacked, kakistocratic global empire only posing as your former country. That's my feelings on this. And then George Carlin's famous line, everybody wants the truth until you tell it to them, and then you're an asshole, George Carlin.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
So Barnett's view of Americanism is 100% degree opposite of what mine is, in which he illustrates what he declared on page 17. So I'm reading through this guy's book, and I'm just vomiting constantly. And I had to take a shower. I had to take a really serious shower after reading this guy's book.
I bet.
And I eventually just tossed it. The quote, I mean, sometimes you got to sometimes you got to wash evil off.
Yeah, I agree.
Do your own little ritual. The U.S. military is a force for global good that I believe has no equal, he says. So once you imbibe or accept a dose of that fiction, you can actually accept the twisted mission he has in mind. He points out on page 16 that since the end of the Cold War, all the wars and civil wars and genocides have occurred within the gap. His vision for ending war as we know it begins with shrinking this gap, and it ends with making globalization truly global. So that's the argument for globalization. It's the same one Brzezinski used on Russia. Europeanize it, right?
Right.
The world can be roughly divided into two groups. One, those whose shit doesn't stink, who he calls the functioning core. I think that's pretty good humor. Sorry.
The functioning
The
core. Yeah.
The non-integrated gap characterized by unstable leadership and absence of international trade. Isn't that interesting? He throws that international trade
International
in there.
trade. Yeah. Yeah.
Isn't that interesting?
Unless you let the corporate beasts sink their claws into your resources, you're in the gap.
So let's take a look at this. You see the video I have on there? Let's just take a look at this so we could see what this advanced elite country looks like. Can you play that?
This one right here, is this LA?
Yeah. Let's play that. Things got so much clutter on the track that's almost derailing.
So you've seen,
You know, Mr. Barnett, why don't you worry about your own country before you start getting on a pedestal and preaching to the rest of the world?
Well, this is tame in comparison. Have you seen the videos where they're actually doing live heists on these trains? Right.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, this is Mad Max territory.
Well, I think that this scene that we just saw is a byproduct of that, where they would loot the trains and throw shit out, and then the trains come along and they can barely stay on the tracks.
Right.
So the core can be subdivided into the old core. The disconnected gap includes the Middle East, of course, South Asia, except India. Really? Why do you say not India? I mean, it's just very arbitrary.
Northwest. They have to deal with the caste system in India, and the people at the upper part of the caste system are part of their integrated core.
Yep. And they're playing a big role in the United States, one that's kind of unspoken.
That's right. Mm-hmm.
The vision propels a strategy for the United States, one that makes audacious demands that America equate its national security with that of globalism's continued survival and success. He writes, he argues that the big lie that is September 11th, the crime syndicate false flag, proves that globalization requires a bodyguard because there's still numerous forces throughout the gap and even inside the core working against it. Well, I guess it depends on what you think happened on 9/11. Kind of answers that.
Yep.
And so I have a little meme over there. If you really believe a little plane made this engineering marvel collapse twice, then you need to do some research.
Yep.
So on page 21, we get the punchline of the scam. Thanks to the global war on terrorism, we now understand that it likewise demands the clear enunciation and enforcement of a security rule set as well. So completely tied into the boogeyman philosophy of these other influencers, these other Sabatier and Frankis. So somehow all this fighting boogeyman terrorism requires the goal of universal inclusiveness, which sneaks in mass open border immigration as a new age enlightening process for everyone. So this is effectively illuminism to break down high trust societies.
That's a great art. That's a great paragraph. It really sums it up.
Yep.
And breaking down, because we live now in, I would say it's a low trust society. Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, the social contract is completely in tatters.
So you pretend that the core is doing fine. This guy's just, he's hallucinating or making up some kind of a false, I don't know what you'd call it. He's preaching to generals. So he's preaching to the elite. His presentations are, you generals need to go out there and protect the gap against all the terrorists and the core against all the terrorists and the gap countries out there and the global economy, and just make sure that they're towing the line for our bankster friends.
So you have this paragraph here that says Barnett does not recognize that America's enemies will use asymmetrical war against the U.S. Well, isn't he theoretically one of them?
Yeah, for some reason he misses the asymmetrical war. I think that's how other countries are going to fight the United States, asymmetrical warfare.
It's already happening.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so he says the military should organize itself into two functions, the Leviathan and the system administrator. Leviathan's oxymoronic purpose is the use of overwhelming force in order to end violence quickly. In the clown world, this is called full spectrum dominance. Leviathan will take out governments to defend core countries. Barnett does recognize that America's enemies will use asymmetric warfare against the United States, focusing on its economic interest in citizenry. Now, that's what Russia and China are starting to do. Just going to the weak points of the country.
Yeah. Well, immigration, migration is asymmetric warfare. Fentanyl is asymmetric warfare, right? Inserting social emotional learning into the education system is asymmetrical warfare. This is what's happening, right? Even one could make a case that the COVID pandemic was asymmetrical warfare.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's done by these guys, Barnett and his friends. So, I mean, I kind of think that the enemy, if you want to call him the enemy, I mean, I don't even want to use that term, his imaginary boogeymen, they can target the super expensive weaponry. And so that was demonstrated, a couple of years ago in Saudi Arabia. So you got fourth generation warfare naturally favors definitions of conflict far less driven by technological advancement than by the enduring qualities of men in combat, has been neglected by the United States. So rather than keeping a good force intact in terms of manpower, they've weakened them. And then they get these really expensive weapons because that's what powers the military industrial complex. And then some Houthi drone destroys it.
Right.
And so that's a pretty good trade-off in terms of economic cost.
Right. Well, I mean, you can even look at the fourth generational warfare stuff with, all the drone sorties that were carried out in Afghanistan and Iraq. I've talked about this. You have these, literally, they're kids, they're young people hanging out in NORAD or, and they've got their Starbucks coffee and they're basically running a video game on these drones and, taking out targets in Afghanistan and Iraq. I mean,
drones are amazing. Yeah, drones are amazing weapons.
That is so far removed from the field of battle. It's not even funny. It is completely disassociative. And all created for a generation that was essentially raised on video games. I mean, they've been practicing this stuff since they would have put their hands on a video console, and they just moved them into the war theater and make it completely disassociative. And it's just things that happen on a screen halfway around the planet.
Yeah,
so,
very impersonal.
Yeah, very impersonal.
So right, the very idea that American aristocrats and sub-zeros could transform foreign societies and cultures would be comical if it wasn't so devastating. Its only purpose is the war industry business and keeping future foreign competition reduced, beaten down, and weak. Even Barnett admits that the Middle East wasn't about oil. And we saw how it worked in Libya. Libya's a real good example. America bombs, Europe gets the refugees. That's evil. Good article there. And then he talks about the sysadmin force, which is primarily staffed by older, more experienced personnel. I say AKA crime syndicate psychopaths and flying monkeys, though not entirely. He would put the hive mind Marines in this SINS admin as the Me Too Leviathan. I guess that would be the guys who kick down your door and take you away to Gitmo-like facilities in the middle of the night. What a frightful imagination and vision. Then I have a link to an article that says the ex-wife of highly ranked Colonel Kay Griggs feels the deep state in the crime syndicate, the Kay Griggs interview. If you really want to find out what these military guys are all about, that he's talking about, the sysadmin people.
Yeah, it's a very long series of videos. I think it's about 5 or 6 hours, but it's worth watching. It's one of the most revealing, at times, if you're not ready for it, shocking, series of admissions and revelations by the wife of a former military colonel. Right? It's kind of mind blowing what she talks about.
So Barnett on page 21 mentions something called the military market nexus. This is the link between war and everything else that is globalization. The nexus describes the underlying reality that the warrior culture of the military both supports and is supported by the merchant culture of the business world. In other words, these criminal organizations basically working together. No rules, no money, no security, no Leviathan, no security. So if you don't have any rules, no money, no security, no rules, no Leviathan, no security, no American will, no American will, no Leviathan. In other words, greed backed by blood. Next, we have the rule subset reset, page 22. That's the scamdemic. So you have when a crisis triggers your realization that your world is woefully lacking certain types of rules, you start making up new rules with a vengeance, like the Patriot Act and the doctrine of preemption following 9/11.
Yeah, right.
Or and this is all before COVID. That's the wonder of kind of.
Well, I mean, I think if you go through work like this and Brzezinski and Jacques Attali, who's another, have you ever gotten into him by any chance?
Mm-mm.
Oh, you should do an article on him. Look up. I'll send you a couple links. Jacques Attali has written a couple of books. He's like Brzezinski on steroids, and he's still around. He's in France. He basically says where everything is going, right? So if you root around enough and you see what these people are talking about, even somebody as completely nuts as Yuval Noah Harari, he's telling you where they're going, right?
Yeah, they are. They really are.
Yeah.
Yeah, ignore them at your own peril.
So,
and same with what's his name? Karl Klaus.
you mean Klaus Schwab?
Klaus Schwab. Same with him. He has a lot of warnings.
So here's my theory on Schwab and the WEF. My theory is that I think in their hearts, they know that people don't want to eat bugs, right? Like, I think if they press hard enough, that they'll run into resistance. So I feel like what they're doing is they're giving people this really horrific smorgasbord of the reality that they are supposedly planning for them. But in actuality, and if they can get away with it, I think they'll be happy with that. We'll say, okay, you want bugs? We'll give you bugs, right? If you're that stupid, then we'll give it to you. But I think that what they really want to do is they want to do a bait and switch. And they want to give people a much more user-friendly and ideologically acceptable way of putting the handcuffs on. And that
soy boy type stuff.
Well, no, I think it's more along the lines of, let's say, for instance, a lot of people who are kind of trapped in the Q world talk about this digital money system. I don't know if you've heard about it, but this digital money system would replace our current money system, and it would be patrolled by AI, right? And AI would make these decisions. This is good AI, by the way, white hat AI, that it would make decisions based on your purchasing patterns and habits. So if it deemed that you were a theoretical threat to the system, or you were a bad guy and you were using the money to move drugs, pay for children, trafficking, etc., it would take notice and it would cut you off, right? Like, this is the type of technology that's being peddled. Well, look, we get this technology, we get this new money system, it's patrolled by good AI, and it'll make sure that the bad guys don't get to use their resources because of the digital oversight, right? Well, I don't want AI, good or bad, monitoring my purchasing, but they're setting this up in a way where it looks benevolent, and they'll throw in some other things, like maybe they'll throw in a med bed, or maybe they'll throw something into the program where all of a sudden people go, oh, wow, this is much better than the Klaus Schwab version. It really fits our model here, right? But really what they're doing is they're getting people
a switch and bait. Yeah.
It's a bait and switch, and they put the handcuffs on them in a way where people aren't even really understanding the level of consent that they're agreeing to. So I think a lot of the Schwab stuff, I mean, I look, if people will eat bugs, they'll say, fine, we'll give you bugs. But if there's a reasonable pushback, they got a plan B and they got a plan C lined up for people that makes it a lot more palatable. We'll throw your boy Elon Musk.
That's what Barnett really kind of pushes. It's called system perturbations, which creates a demand for new rules. So the excuse for preemption is the big new rule. That's kind of what you're talking about, is just sort of slipping in new rules.
But a rule for all, really. A rule for all, not just new rules, but a new rule and a new order for all.
Yeah, new rules and interventions, and having a big scam around that. So it's all about control.
Either way, and this is what I talk about, and that people should be really discerning when new technologies come in, or the the heralders of new technologies, and maybe Elon Musk plays a role in that world. I don't know, right? But it's quite easy for them to set him up as a theoretical white hat, and then he's going to usher in like the new decentralized, centralized coin. Well, I mean, we're kind of far down the line here, but ultimately, I think that's where they want to bring. They would, if they could crush people and get them to eat bugs and get the majority of people to do it, they will. But if there's any pushback, they got the new rule or the new order, and it's there for the people that find whatever it is they were pushing distasteful. Oh, you don't like that? Well, here, have this. You'll like this. Oh yeah, this is really good. It's the same thing. We're just we're just bait and switching the product.
I mean, the takeaway for everybody listening to this tonight is that we've presented you a plethora of individuals who've pretty much spelled it out. They're not hiding any of this stuff.
Right. And I think, again, we rewind this conversation to 10 minutes back, there are people that are telling you what they're doing and what they would like to do. And whether it's the benevolent model or the malevolent model, they want to reduce the level of people on this planet. That goes without saying. Like, they want to reduce, carbon zero is really getting rid of everybody, right? I mean, we're carbon. They don't want any more carbon on the planet.
But they seem to be also dedicated into having certain elite groups ruling the roost and being on top.
Absolutely.
And I don't think the Americans are necessarily at the top of the pyramid on that at all. I really don't.
No,
I think Americans are very expendable.
I think Americans are in the crosshairs.
Yeah.
They want to eradicate what this place theoretically stood for. And they want to eradicate ideas like meritocracy. This goes back to our conversation earlier in the show. We were talking about the guys that built the computer systems that the world is really running on. They want to get rid of those dudes. They don't want that. They don't want like legacy examples of people that have built things. That's a heresy.
Go and work out. That's white supremacist, man.
Right. or going back to It's a Wonderful Life. Get rid of it. This is all part of the story. This is all part of the narrative. So, whether they want to replace it with something egalitarian, more egalitarian and more diverse, or they want to replace it with something that resembles, I don't know, a more nationalistic, pseudo-nationalistic model. They'll go in that direction. This is about power, right? This is what Anthony Sutton talks about. They'll just push it any way they want to push it, right? Any way they feel like they can get the most bang for their buck and bring the most people underneath their rubric of control. That's the way they'll go.
Yeah, I have a closing meme I'd like you to put up
Sure.
that I kind of answered.
Where is it?
Let me just send it to you real quick in Twitter.
Okay.
Here it comes. This is my answer to this lady, this Olivia Waxman, and her ridiculous premise about exercise.
Yeah.
You see the file I just sent you?
Yeah, I did. Let me put it up here. Oh, yeah.
Sometimes
I saw this. This is funny.
Sometimes I like to inject a little humor as a battle tool. I think memes are good.
I think memes can be really good, especially if they're really good memes. So this is Mrs. Brady with Jan, right? Or Marsha Brady. Jan's the middle one. You must have let the dystopian nightmare bullshit dim your fucking sparkle. That's pretty funny.
When somebody pulls the wool over your eyes about exercise, it's a good meme. Good meme to use.
Yeah. And especially it's the Brady Bunch, right? It's this uber nuclear family welded together who just happen to be so-called white. Good one. Well, Russ, I'd love to revisit this whole neocon thing next time we're on the show.
It's kind of endless topic.
Because I really want to dig into sort of the modern day version of them and what's happening in Ukraine, because they're playing such a huge role in reshaping, what's happening with resources, economy, the collective mind share, this whole Zelensky beast, right? So maybe it'd be worthwhile, and who knows, maybe you'll write an article or two by that time that'll connect with it. In the meantime, check out Jacques Attali. I'll send you a link to him. Once you go down the Attali rabbit hole, he'll connect so many pieces, because he's the guy that's telling us where things are going to go now, not from Brzezinski in the 70s, but now into the future.
So he just picks up where Brzezinski left off.
Oh, yeah. And he's very candid. He's very, very candid about what's going to happen. And it's not very far-fetched or too far afield. So, and maybe we can even talk about him next time. We'll leave it open. There's plenty to talk about. In the meantime, Russ, thanks for being here, and enjoy the fireworks in Prague tomorrow night, and have a good time.
There they are.
And I'll catch you over on Twitter, and we'll chat, and clearly we'll see you next month. Okay.
Okay. Goodbye, everybody. See ya.
That's the great Russ Winter with winterwatch.net. And you can go over he's got 1,200 articles, deep research. If you want to find out, who these players are, how we got here, it's a Mercury retrograde. You can spend some time. You spend a lot of time on his website. Like, one thing leads to another. It's like that website is an incredible resource, because it gets very hard to find information specific pieces through Google now. It's really difficult. So if you go to his website, you're bypassing a great deal of the search effort. And he's got links and internal links and exterior links. So go check him out. I got two other things I want to take care of today before we sign off. I did not give any love to my sponsor, or the sponsor. It sounds like I'm in AA. I got to give some love to my sponsor. We were having coffee and cigarettes over a donut the other day, and he reminded me of, why I'm here and why they're here. It's not quite like that. So the sponsor of the show is, let me do this, True Hemp Science. And let me go to my website. So truehempscience.com has been an absolute oasis in 2022 for people. And it even looks like an oasis when you go to their website. I'll show you. It's been an absolute oasis. And we have really spread the gospel of CBD in I think, a really effective and holistic manner. Of course, the big hitter is always the organic gummies for sleep. They're fantastic. I had some moon dust this morning, and doing the moon dust, I got to tell you, makes it a lot easier for me to do my 8 o'clock astrological weather report. Perks me right up. Clarity moon dust with CBGA, and I think Chris is coming out with a gummified version of it, which I have tried. I got to tell you, it was good, really good. So if you're interested in getting True Hemp Science's fine products, all you got to go, all you have to do, and I'll leave a link in the show notes, is go to truehempscience.com/ref/23. And the reason why you want to go there is that when you check out and spend $100 or more, all you got to do is type in 15MINS. You'll get free product. Chris will make sure you get free product. He's really generous. He likes to spread some interesting things around. It's usually something outside of your order so that you can try something new. The other thing you can do, if you have any questions about CBD, how it works, how it might work for you, you could call them up, and you'll either get Marsha or you'll get Chris, and you'll be able to ask them any question you want about CBD, and they'll help you out. So $150 or more, and you get free shipping. So there you go. Maybe you want to start your 2023 off with a dedication towards personal wellness, and that could be a step in the right direction. The other thing I wanted to bring up here before we exit is I have a friend who is doing a very cool new YouTube channel. Let me see if I can bring it up here. And I love to promote the community. And the YouTube channel is Gourmet Apocalypse. Let me give you guys a link here. And you can get all kinds of really interesting looks into how to make Turkish pastry, gourmet pizza at home, Turkish yogurt soup, apple pie, the best drought tolerant crop. So it's a pretty new channel, but it's gaining some traction. I'm one of their 23 subscribers, by the way. You got some, this is really great. So this is zucchini seedlings growing time. So you get kind of a time-lapse photography view with zucchini, filet mignon, mesquite fire, fresh arugula. So this is cooking steak over an open flame. So, the apocalypse does not have to be dreary, boys and girls. You can cook and eat and survive and thrive through the apocalypse. So check out Gourmet Apocalypse, and I'll leave a link to their YouTube channel. And high quality videos, lots of fun. And I guarantee you'll be hungry after you watch at least one of them. All right, I'm out of here. I'll be back on Sunday night on the 1st with Sunday Night Astro Live, and we'll be looking at 2023. I'll be taking some phone calls, and it'll be a lot of fun. It'll be like a post New Year's Eve party. We're going to roll New Year's Eve right into Sunday night. All right. Thanks for being here. Mods, thank you very much. Chataria and everybody else, much love. From Jasper, the astrological cat, he wishes you all a very good new year, don't you? About time you showed up. You've been MIA in the morning on the morning show. You get your little can of cat food and you're back to bed. And then, you show up at around 1:00. You got cat privilege. You do. You have cat privilege. All right, everybody. Thanks for being here. I'll see you guys on Sunday night. Once again, thanks for Russ Winter, winterwatch.net. Until then, use your head in order to discern what's real and your heart to step on what's possible. I'm Robert Phoenix. Have a great New Year's.